Mr. Golding, Keith Duncan says the PNP's proposal to increase the income tax threshold to 3.5 million is impractical and impossible to fund without new taxes. Can you explain how these planned tax breaks will work without hurting the economy?
The context in which we have decided to increase the threshold to 3.5 million is the hollowing out of the middle class in this country. Working families finding it extremely difficult to make ends meet. And we believe with the debt to GDP ratio having now, after 13 and a half years of belt tightening and austerity, having now reached the cusp of the target of 60% of GDP introduced into the fiscal rules in law under Portia Simpson Miller, this is a time, this year it's expected to actually, with the readjustment of the definition and calculation of GDP, this is a year that we expect to achieve that target. That will release 2.5% to 3% of GDP of additional resources, which were not previously budgeted for in the fiscal policy paper. That is more than sufficient to pay for our entire program, including the $3.5 million increase to 3.5 million of the tax threshold, which will make our civil servants and our middle managers, and indeed most of Jamaicans who are presently suffering under the high burden of the cost of living, have money that they can spend, they can fix up their homes, extend their homes with a room, buy a car if they don't have one, pay down debt where they may be in arrears. It is necessary to preserve the country from brain drain and to keep the society intact.
Dr. Holness now has the opportunity to respond.
The hollowing out of the middle class is an act of the PNP. They totally decimated the middle class. It is the Jamaica Labour Party that introduced the increase in the non-tax threshold that recreated a middle class in Jamaica. In fact, when you look at the salary profile of PAYE contributors, you would see that their salaries have all risen. It is a Jamaica Labour Party through the compensation review that has increased salaries by over 200 billion Jamaican dollars for public sector workers. The current proposal of the PNP is unworkable.
We now ask Dion Jackson Miller to start this segment with a question for Mr. Mark Golding.
Going back to the income tax proposal, Mr. Golding, because several people have been taking issue with your numbers, the PNP's assertion that it can fund the proposal through projected revenue growth doesn't seem to take into, as well as organic revenue growth, doesn't seem to take into account increase in expenditure. That's also projected, as well as low growth rates that no government in recent years has managed to overcome. Isn't it true that your numbers just don't add up?
The fiscal policy paper does project over the next 3 years some $160 billion of additional revenue. The degree to which there are accompanying expenses will depend on how we manage the expense side of the budget. There's also the fact that there are $360 billion of programs in the budget that represent the priorities of a given government at a particular point in time. When we are elected, we're not going to be elected to maintain the current trajectory that Jamaica is on. People want to see change. And most fundamentally, the issue really is the fact that we are coming to the end of the period of austerity, the period where Jamaica has been for 13 and a half years steadfastly paying down debt. So that the debt to GDP ratio, which we inherited at 147% of GDP at the beginning of 2012, is now, in this fiscal year, projected to achieve the target of 60% of GDP. Once that happens, we no longer have to reduce debt as a priority. We just have to maintain that debt profile. That will release resources of 2.5% to 3% of GDP, which is close to $90 billion of additional resources, which no longer have to be part of your primary surplus target. So we will be able to fund our program quite comfortably come April next year, when the fiscal year starts.
Dr. Holness?
You know, there is a song which says, when the rum tells you you're a big dancer. I don't know what the leader of the opposition was drinking. Firstly, the debt to GDP for this fiscal year is not projected to be 60%. It is projected to be 65% thereabouts. If the leader of the opposition is depending on growth to provide the revenues for $75 billion of expenditure, the country would have to grow between 8 and 10%, which has not done that since the 60s. Thirdly, yes, there are $300 billion of programs. What are these programs? Pharmaceuticals.
Thank you, Dr. Holness. Thank you, Dr. Holness. Our next question is from Giovanni Dennis, and it goes to Dr. Holness.
Dr. Holness, you said on February 7, 2016 in Sam Sharp Square, Montego Bay, within our first 100 days in government, we will start the legislative process to fix the general election date in Jamaica. It's been 3,490 days since. In your May 2016 budget debate, you further stated the country should not be distracted by protracted periods of uncertainty. Yet, that's exactly what happened with this year's election. After 2 consecutive terms in office, you have failed to deliver on this promise. Why?
Your research into this matter, I respect the question, is incomplete. At the calling of the 2020 general elections, I explained to the public in Parliament that our government actually started work on fixed election date, and we found that it was inconsistent with our constitutional arrangements. And therefore, we did not include it in our 2020 manifesto. It is no longer a part of our platform. More to that, however, is the fact that in seeking to have all of these previous considerations included, we went about putting in place a constitutional reform commission that would bring all the considerations for constitutional reform under an expert review. That expert review was thwarted by the opposition. So, yes, these considerations were considered from 2016, but the reality of our constitutional arrangement made us take a different route, which is to go to a comprehensive constitutional reform, which was frustrated by the opposition.
Over to Mr. Golding to respond.
Just before I respond, just to point out that Mr. Holness's data is not current. The Fiscal Commissioner issued a release, I think it was today actually, indicating that with the National System of Accounts being updated, GDP has been adjusted, and we're now at 62% of GDP. That's what the debt is at the end of March this year, and we will more than likely achieve 60% this fiscal year. No, please, you're not entitled to do that. The flip-flopping from the Prime Minister is manifest. They were supposed to have impeachment. There's no impeachment. Fixed election day, no fixed election day. Ring fencing the NHT, they have taken over $130 billion out of the NHT. Cannot be trusted.
Just reminding that there is a format to the debate and asking the debaters to respect the format to which they have agreed. It's